This is Ron Bracewell, and in the New York Times, I think his New York Times obituary, he was quoted as saying, if people try to become acquainted with their trees, it would enhance their lives. Sounds really simple, but it's something I meditate on quite a bit. Get to know the trees around you. Let's go off on our walk.
I absolutely love this class. It was definitely like one of the favorite classes that I've taken at Stanford.
We have about 350 to 400 tree species on campus, which is pretty impressive. That's practically a biodiversity hotspot. Of course, a lot of them are exotics. And about 43,000 trees on central campus.
It's really rare to have a class that you can take and it gives you so much joy just from like showing up to class. But each time I would come, and like whether we were going on a field trip to like the Cal Academy or going on walks around Stanford, I always learned something new and like saw the world in a different way, but also just got a lot of really pure appreciation for just like looking up at the trees or like taking that time to see the world better.
My name is Devaki Bhaya. I'm a senior staff scientist at the Carnegie Institution.
Stanford had a whole bunch of other interests, agricultural interests, winemaking, he had all kinds of projects, and actually was very affectionate towards trees, in the words of his wife, and wanted a huge arboretum.
I taught this class, going back a little bit into history, was a class called Party with Trees, and the motivation for that really was that I love trees, and I grew up in India, and then I came to the US. I didn't recognize a lot of trees, and it sort of kept gnawing at me that this is not a nice way to be. And finally decided that I would teach a class, and no better way to learn than to teach. And so it all came together, and it made me realize that trees are a wonderful way to evoke a lot of science and interest, and also bringing people together.
I really like how many different places we got to explore. Getting to like get off campus every week and see new places, or even like on campus meet new people, and like go to places on campus that I've never seen before that are now gonna like become a part of my routine to like go visit. It was really cool and really special.
Almost every week we either went on tree walks or field trips. What is the value of learning in that style out of the classroom?
I think it's tremendous, actually. My father wrote, he grew up in India, always learning. He was highly intelligent, multidimensional person. And he learned a lot by observing. And he then wanted, when he got much famous, to actually start a university where the concept was you learn under the trees and you learn about nature and science through observation. Not because you are in a formalized, and in that case also colonial, setup. And I truly believe that that is the way one should learn. That's how children learn. And we sort of erase that by putting your whole life into a textbook. That's not where creativity or passion come from.
I've never walked around and noticed more after taking this class. Like, I'm just so much more observant. And when I see leaves on trees and I think about, how could that help me identify this tree? Whereas opposed to might like notice a tree out of the corner of my eye and maybe subconsciously observe it and be like, oh, it's a nice day today, but not really recognize that that tree is so cool and it's making me feel this way. And kind of the general desire to learn more about everything around me, specifically trees, and also just the curiosity for why things are and why trees are doing what they're doing, is something that like has totally changed my outlook on the things that really make up our life and make it the way it is, trees in particular.
I think a big part of the class was just perceiving. I think because we go around campus a lot and we pass all these trees, on our ways to class or, you know, in between things, and we don't usually look around and like see what actually is around us. I climbed a tree the other day, and I like a lot of the time, like I'll sit up in the tree like literally 6 feet above the ground, and people will walk below me and like not even notice at all. Even though I'm like right at their eye level, like my feet are at their eye level, like nobody notices. So I think like just observing and noticing and appreciating was also a really big part of the class for me.
Leland Stanford wanted the first boys' dorm to be named Encina after the coastline boat. He was the Glover of our native boats. And he wanted the first girls' dorm to be named Roble or Robley, which is our second most common native oak, the Valley Oak, which will be our second stop.
But it also was a time in and of itself to appreciate the world. And there really aren't that many times that you can do that in Stanford life, in this like really hectic pace of life where you're just rushing from one thing to another. But getting to almost be a kid again, to go to a planetarium and go to a science museum and go on walks and like have snacks, it brought me back to childhood, but with all the experience and all the knowledge that I have at this point. And so having that like childhood joy in a way where I can use that going forward to inform research or inform my own thoughts.
My favorite field trip probably had to be to Jurassic.
I think my favorite was Jurassic.
I think my favorite had to be Jurassic.
Just going over to the Santa Cruz Mountains and just immersing ourselves in this forest, and it was foggy that day, and so we were able to go on this walk that brought us through these forests that were dotted with little art pieces.
There was something particularly like magical about the mist and the rain and the way it smelled and the way everything was so calm and quiet, and the way like the art and the space just worked together.
I think people are trying to get back into their connection with nature and the elemental sort of nature of being. And so doing artwork in nature and connecting with nature in a way where you're using your creativity and your inspiration and your connection with nature into making art, it's just very symbiotic. They sort of lend themselves to one another. So I feel like artists belong in nature, doing art and creating things in nature. It's a beautiful combination.
To see like all the artwork that people were working on, and to learn that people are also like doing artists in residence and like writing poetry and all that kind of stuff really opened my eyes to like what is possible within nature, like outside of just the scientific side of things.
It wasn't just that we were going to see some art. We were going to see art in trees and also the trees themselves. And having that juxtaposition between the landscape and this very place-based art was just an incredible experience. Getting to experience that with an entire class of people who are just as passionate and just as excited about it. I remember like walking through early on in the hike, we were just starting to go through the redwood grove and just looking up at the rain falling through the trees from these very like top of the branches. And it was just like, it wasn't just me that was looking up. Everybody was looking up to the branches. And then not just that, but also every time we spotted something new.
There's a bunch of little newts walking around.
It was this moment of like excitement and pure joy. That was really, it was just an incredible experience to have.
And on that note, get out of here.
I'm also very interested in how science and art can come together. And even though there's no magic formula for that, I think that was one thing I wanted to get across through the poetry we did, through the folks who visited. And you remember some of them, Katie Holton, Obi Kaufman, all sorts of folks.
I feel like often like we'll see paintings and people will like paint a landscape and then leave and then have that landscape. Whereas I think for Jurassic and King and like also Obi, their art was very integrated into the landscape, which I thought was really cool. And it was also very personal, and it also had something to say, which I thought was really powerful.
So I do work with trees. All my work is like environmental, deals with. I just think it's a real way to ask questions about the world.
One of her pieces that stood out to me was the one where she like had pieces of writing on different stair steps in different parts of the city. And I can't remember if those were integrated into her walk that she created, but it kind of like created a walk within itself.
These are seaweeds that were collected back in 2003, the year that I had been there. But so you can see the shapes, right? These are growing plants, but obviously now they're dead and they're squished and left in the archive. But they mirror, they're the same forms as, that's the internet on the left. In 1991, that was a map of the internet. And a 1911 map of London. So cities, human-made systems that we create grow in the same way. They look the same as human brains, as plants and cells. If you have like a petri dish and bacteria is growing. And trees are the same thing. So you can use space in the most efficient way.
I think when Katie came in to talk about the tree alphabet, that was something that was really wild, and I really liked that.
So each tree is a character, and a character is the font. And I can use the tree drawings to create a font. And so you can tell stories, you can have an alphabet with the trees.
I think for me, one of the main themes of this class was finding joy in learning again. And so whether this was in creating art around trees or looking at art that other people created and wondering, okay, how do we use that to create more scientific awareness, like with the tree alphabet? There was just a sense that we could take this incredible joy in actually learning more things.
Obi Kaufman, he came and gave a really, really powerful talk to me in terms of just really thinking about our place among trees.
He was talking about our future and our future in relation to their natural environments, because it has this very apocalyptic feel to it sometimes with all these wildfires and hearing a lot about the way that we've degraded our environments. But he made a point that was really interesting, that was talking about what we're looking forward to and the things that we're reaching towards and not just things that we're running away from.
Conclusion from my book is that the systems, the endemic systems, are as resilient as they are fragile. At least as resilient as they are fragile. Nature always tends towards regeneration, at least in any foreseeable time scale. The biggest problem is attuning to what I falsely called California's most precious resource in the title of my second book. It's not the material substance of water that's our most precious resource, but our ability to tell each other a story at all. And to have the conversation where we're not talking about surviving next Tuesday. What we're talking about is 100-year business plans. What we're talking about is what California is going to look like in 500 years.
A couple weeks ago, we had a speaker who came out and was talking to us about kind of the way that trees are going to have to change and how they're, with the way that our climate is changing and different weather patterns and temperatures, and trees can't move.
When you look at climate change projections for the range of coast live oak, by the end of the century, which is now the middle of the century, it's gone. This is a tree that is in decline throughout its native range. And this is the scary part about being alive, or one of the many scary parts about being alive at this moment in history, is that essentially the global forests are dying.
So trying to think about the ways that trees will change going into the future, and how climate change might affect the environment that trees live in and the way that they're able to really continue going on. And so thinking about how we have so much to learn from trees, and that they could really help us understand how moving forward we can both adapt to climate change, and we're going to need them to bring with us places. And so figuring out how to help trees move places, it's a really complex issue, but that's something that was really interesting.
How do we partner with trees? That is the ultimate question. how do we be good stewards of the land and interact with this natural world in such a way that we leave it better for those who come after us. And I think that's, for me, the ultimate goal of the class and something that I definitely will take with me forward.
I do think that a big theme, at least to me, was that connection to nature and to trees and building that like affinity with it. That's what I kind of really understood from the course. And so like going to Jurassic and looking at art, or like every time they gave like a science lecture on, you know, like things that were happening in trees, or looking at like Vince's woodworking, or all the oak trees on campus and how that kind of connects into campus history, or even how trees play such a role in like local culture here, indigenous culture here. I do think that was like a theme, is just how it kind of plays into everything that we do everywhere around us.
For my tribe, living in the same area we have for 12,000 plus years, we have a special relationship with the trees. We build redwood canoes to go up and down the coast of California and in our villages, which are all along the Klamath River. And to make those, we never cut down the redwood tree. We always make sure we wait until one falls down. So we're never taking the redwood's life. And then it takes about 7 years to carve a redwood tree to sail up and down the river with. And one of the particular things about us considering the trees having a life is that we'll carve lungs, eyes, kidneys, and a heart into the redwood canoe. And so we do that because we believe a canoe without a heart will sink. And we treat it as if it is a person. So in my language, we have like 20 different counting systems. So if I were to count this like water bottle, for example, I'd count it as something cylinder. But if I were to count a notebook, like 1, 2 notebooks, it would be a different counting system because they're both flat. But for us, we count the redwood trees and the canoes the same as we count people, which kind of gives you an idea of like what they mean to us.
Being able to identify a tree is like being able to walk up to someone and know their name, and just it builds a more personal relationship with the things that are around you, which I think kind of allows you to feel more connected to a place and more involved in the spaces that you're in, and not just feel like someone who's passing through.
My relationship with trees definitely grew. I've always loved trees, loved climbing trees, loved just being around trees, but it made me really start to think about the specific trees that are around us, and especially like on the Stanford campus. Like I'll be walking by something, I'll be like, oh, I bet that's an Italian stone pine or something, and it creates this connection to these trees.
I think it was really cool to have like a very like interdisciplinary look at something that's usually more scientifically focused on.
They've mentioned all the different ways all of us can approach this class, and I just wanted to emphasize that each of us is going to have our own approach. My particular passion, other than fonts, is identifying trees. It won't be everyone's passion, and that's just fine. Some people might focus more on the feeling you get when you climb a tree or embrace a tree or lie beneath it, or the conservation part of it. Each of us has our own approaches.
I wanted to bring my sense of love and awe about trees and transmit that to everyone, but to use that as a starting place to say, well, if you start getting interested and passionate about something, where do you go?
I think the theme was very interpretable and could be made very personal, which I think we kind of saw through like the final projects in the class.
So in my project, I investigated the co-production of citizen science and technology. But I want to make an authentic 3D model of trees.
I think it's a research project on technology and like how it's used.
The breadth of the projects that the students did, it was just mind-blowing. Because what it said to me was that each of them had a passion which sort of they had molded into the project and brought in trees. And I remember everything from folks who grew up in the Central Valley interested in trees and made that into a project, to somebody who said she always wanted to make a bowl that represents something and she did that. And no two projects were even remotely similar.
Like the economy of Haas avocados, like I didn't know that entire world, and I probably wouldn't have looked into it. But now knowing it, every time I eat an avocado, I'm like, oh yeah, like I know there's a whole like world behind this.
I really enjoyed the class. Like I thought it was a very different experience from the class I had.
So there's so much to learn from trees, and I think that that's just been an overarching theme to this class, is that trees have so much to offer to us, and it's just a matter of figuring out what they're trying to say.
There's just so much joy in not just the beauty of it, but also the science of it, and really unlocking that, and unlocking the curiosity about that joy, and seeing, okay, so our curiosity fuels the joy, but then the joy also fuels the curiosity, and having this like cyclical loop.
Learning is something you never stop doing, and if it's your curiosity that drives it, I've done what I needed to do.